Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to explore something pretty wild, this whole idea of prophets returning, especially in Christianity. Like that second coming concept.
Yeah.
We're looking at excerpts from this article. It's called The Root of Religious Expectations, Why Prophets Must Return. And honestly, some of this stuff really got me thinking.
Oh, yeah. It's a fascinating look at the history, the symbolism, even how this belief has been, well, maybe misinterpreted over the centuries.
Okay, so I guess we got to start with Jesus himself, right? The article points out he wasn't exactly born a king, more like, humble carpenter's son. He even mentions his mother, Mary, dealt with some serious accusations. Not really the image of some conquering hero, is it?
Not at all. What's interesting is Jesus was very much an outsider, rejected by a lot of folks, even facing accusations against his mother, Mary. This really frames how we understand his message, It was about spiritual change, not worldly power.
And then there's the whole resurrection thing. I always thought of it as like literally physically happening. But this article kind of presents it as a symbol. What do you make of that?
You've hit a major point. Lots of folks take the resurrection literally, but the article argues for a more symbolic interpretation. Think about it. After the crucifixion, the disciples were terrified, hiding out. It was Mary Magdalene who pushed them, told them to keep Jesus' mission going. That bravery, that refusal to let fear win, that's the real resurrection, wouldn't you say?
Makes you wonder how much of history we've gotten wrong just because certain voices weren't heard.
It's definitely something to consider. History is often told by the winners, and the voices of those on the margins, especially women, get lost.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about Mary Magdalene, the article emphasizes how important she was. She's often painted as a minor figure, but, without her, who knows if Christianity would even survive those early years.
She's often overlooked, but Mary Magdalene's role was crucial. In a world where women's voices were often dismissed, she was the first to witness the resurrected Christ, the one who spread the news to the disciples. Her testimony, her unwavering faith, those became the foundation of early Christianity. Without her courage and determination, who knows what would have happened?
Right. So let's get down to it. Why this whole longing for a prophet to return, especially as this powerful figure who'll fix everything? What's the draw?
It's a big question. And this article, it digs into both the psychological and the political sides of it. On a psychological level, imagine you've been persecuted, pushed aside, maybe even ridiculed for what you believe. The idea of that prophet coming back with all this power, well, it feels good. It's like the universe is saying, see, you were right all along.
Like all that suffering, all that pain, now it's payback time.
You could see it that way, yeah. But this concept, it can be used by religious leaders too, and not always in a good way.
Wait, are you saying they might exploit this belief to hold on to their own power?
Think about it. If your followers are always looking ahead, waiting for this big comeback, they're not going to question things now, are they? They're more likely to just accept whatever those in charge say, especially if those leaders claim to know the prophet's will. It's a way to control the narrative, to keep everyone in line.
Like dangling a carrot forever, keeping them hopeful but also obedient. Distracted from their own spiritual journey, maybe.
Exactly. And that brings us to another thing. The article challenges the whole symbolism of wine.
Oh yeah, the wine represents Jesus's blood thing. Always found that a little intense, honestly.
The article suggests that this, like a lot of religious metaphors, shouldn't always be taken so literally. The wine Jesus offered, it's about inner transformation, divine grace, not a literal blood sacrifice. It's a powerful image, but it's not about physical stuff,
More about what's happening inside us than any ritual or ceremony.
Exactly. Inner change, not outward actions. And while we're on that topic, the article also rethinks what we mean by the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, right. I always pictured it as like an actual place you go after you die.
Yeah.
But the article says that's not quite right, huh?
The kingdom of heaven that Jesus talked about, it isn't a physical location, it's a state of being. It's about cultivating peace within, love, and connection with the divine. Things we can develop now, not after we're gone.
That's a pretty big shift in perspective.
It is, and it makes us rethink what spiritual fulfillment really means. It's not about getting into some far-off paradise. It's about creating that paradise within ourselves, here and now.
That's powerful stuff.
It is, and it's a message that gets lost when we focus on this idea of a prophet coming back to set up an earthly kingdom.
So what happens when we lose sight of that internal focus? What are the consequences of sticking to the idea of a prophet returning as this all-powerful conquering figure?
Now that's where things get really interesting. Because when we get fixated on that external savior idea, we sort of stray from the true path, Spiritual growth, the inner transformation, that's where the real work is.
So we're so busy waiting for someone else to fix things that we forget we have to do our part to create change.
You got it. And that can make us feel kind of stuck, helpless, even willing to justify bad actions, all in the name of this future kingdom.
And that's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? Both for us as individuals and as a society.
No doubt about it. Because in the end, real faith isn't about waiting for someone to rescue us. It's about recognizing our own ability to make things better. To be forces for good, forces for love, compassion, justice. We don't gotta wait for some prophet to come back and do it for us. We can start right now, in our own lives.
Right. That makes sense. It's not about rejecting the idea of a prophet or anything. It's about understanding that our actions, our choices, they really do matter.
That's a crucial point. We're not just watching history happen, we're part of it. We're co-creating our reality with every choice we make.
Okay, so we've talked about the historical side of things, the political, the psychological, but there's another thing this article brings up that I want to dig into a bit more. It's about how this belief, especially the whole earthly kingdom expectation, can be, misused by religious leaders to kind of manipulate and control their followers.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
That's where things get a little uncomfortable, because it shows how these beliefs, in the wrong hands, can be used for bad things. If you can convince people that their salvation, their whole well-being, hinges on following you blindly and waiting for this prophet, you suddenly have a lot of power over them.
Almost like a spiritual hostage situation.
That's a good way to put it. They're stuck, dependent, always looking to the future, never questioning those in charge. It's a classic power dynamic. We see it everywhere, not just in religion. But when it's dressed up in spiritual language, it's even more insidious.
Because then it becomes almost impossible to speak out, to question anything. You risk being called a heretic, a blasphemer, whatever.
Exactly. And that's how these patterns of abuse can go on for generations. People are scared to speak up, and the leaders stay in control.
So it's not just the beliefs themselves, it's about who's using them and how. It's a reminder that we got to be critical of religious institutions, religious leaders, just like we would any other organization or person in power, right?
Absolutely. We got to ask questions, hold folks accountable, make sure we're not being used or exploited. That's on all of us, no matter what we believe or where we worship.
Okay, this has been a lot to take in, but it's really been eye-opening. Before we jump into the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch on what I think is the article's most important message. It's not about waiting for some external savior. It's about that inner change, about creating a better world right here, right now. That's what real faith is about.
I couldn't agree more. We're not passive bystanders in this whole thing. We're active participants, and our choices make a difference.
So how do we do that? How do we go from waiting to actually making things happen? What are some things we can do in our daily lives to put these ideas into action?
That's the million-dollar question, and one we'll explore in more depth in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it. But for now, let's just take a minute and think about what we've learned. What's sticking with you the most? It's funny, as we've been talking about this whole waiting for a prophet thing, I've been thinking about how we do that all the time, even when it's not about religion. We put stuff off, wait for the perfect moment, but maybe that's just another way of giving up our power, letting someone or something else call the shots.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to fall into that trap. Oh, I'll start that project when things calm down, or I'll speak up when I'm not so nervous. But like you said, it's us handing over the reins, letting things outside of us control what we do.
So how do we break free from that? We've talked about these misinterpretations, about the importance of changing from within, but what's that actually look like day to day? How do we put these ideas into action?
Well, I think it begins with awareness. Noticing when we're falling into that passive mode, waiting for something to rescue us. Could be a politician, some new invention, or even a prophet. The first step is taking back that sense of control, realizing we have the power to make a difference right now.
Okay, so no more superhero complex. Got it. No waiting for someone to swoop in and save the day. But what's next? What does active faith look like in real life?
It's about focusing on what we can actually change. Our thoughts, our words, what we do. It's about building up those qualities. Love, compassion, justice, the stuff at the heart of so many faiths. It's not about making some big splash or waiting for some kind of divine sign. It's about the little choices we make every single day.
So if we're not waiting for a prophet to come back and create heaven on earth, how do we make that heaven ourselves?
It starts with asking ourselves some basic questions. How are we treating people? Do our actions line up with what we say we believe? Are we speaking up, using what we have to make things better in our own communities? Are we fighting against injustice, even in small ways?
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And it's not about being perfect. It's about trying to do better each day, learning from when we mess up, and keeping on growing.
Progress over perfection. And remembering that even the little things, kindness, compassion, bravery, they can make a difference, inspire others to do the same.
Think of it like planting a seed. You might not see a big tree right away, but with time and care, it grows into something beautiful, something that gives life, that feeds not just us, but everyone around us.
So we've got awareness, action, those everyday choices. What else matters as we try to figure out all this stuff about faith, prophecy, and the future?
Critical thinking. That's huge. We got to question what we believe, challenge our assumptions, be open to different points of view. Following any ideology blindly, even a religious one, that's dangerous.
Like we said before, that's how folks get manipulated. When they stop asking questions, when they just take everything at face value, that's when they're vulnerable to being used.
Exactly. It's about really engaging with these ideas, not just accepting them without thinking. And being okay with maybe being wrong, with our understanding changing over time. I know that can feel kind of scary because certainty is comfortable, but maybe that certainty is just us avoiding the tough work of really digging into these big questions.
So instead of clinging to rigid beliefs, we embrace the uncertainty, the questions, the whole journey of discovering new things.
Yes, that curiosity, that open mind, that's what real spiritual growth is all about. Keeps us humble, keeps us learning, and stops us from getting all dogmatic and stuck in our ways. It lets us connect with something bigger than ourselves, not just through traditions or rituals, but through actually experiencing life, through that unfolding mystery.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from Jesus' life and what he taught, to how our minds work with belief, to how interpretations can go wrong, how much power each of us really has. But what really sticks with me is that we don't have to wait for someone else to build the world we want to see. We have the power to do it, right here, right now.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Real faith isn't about dogma or going through the motions. It's about how we live, how we treat each other, the choices we make day in and day out. It's about building that peace, love, and justice within ourselves, and then letting it spread out, changing not just us, but the whole world.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. How can you live out these ideas today?
Yeah.
What little act of kindness or bravery or creativity can YU bring into the world? Because the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together, one thought, one word, one action at a time.